Hey guys, it's David here with Varez Media, and today we are talking about a lens which is stuck on my camera more than the average social justice warrior is stuck on Twitter. But thankfully our lens gives us beautiful blurry background bokeh rather than contentious and contemptible cancel culture. The lens in question is the Sigma 35mm f1.4 DGDN. A great wide aperture, full frame, all-rounder lens, which is pretty competitively priced in the context of an f1.4 full frame lens. We will run through lots of test footage while we explain the key features and how this lens performs for video. But just before we start, if you enjoy the video, then please do like, subscribe, comment, and check out the affiliate links to support the channel and to help to keep it alive. With that said, let's start by covering the key facts about the Sigma. We've got an f1.4 maximum aperture and f16 minimum aperture with an 11 rounded blade aperture design, along with a 67mm filter thread at the front and a price for a new unit of around £750. There are switches for auto and manual focus toggling aperture click on and off, and locking aperture position to either the manual range or the auto position for in-camera aperture control, all of which is rather nice, as is the extra customizable button. The industrial design of the lens also looks good for my taste, but that is a subjective view, so let's talk about something more objective, and that is the views that the lens can provide with its field of view. The 35mm focal length of the Sigma is among the most popular choices for a prime lens, and it's easy to see why, as you get a focal length that gives you a significantly wider view than the so-called normal lenses like a 50mm, but with more carefully curated composition than a wide lens like a 20mm. That balance is one of the reasons that I like the lens a whole lot for studio shots like this, where there is clearly a subject, but I want to save you guys from looking at this atrocity and give you a decent amount of background in the frame for context and for contrast. The same goes for landscapes and cinematic B-roll general use, where I find that balanced field of view is great for versatility, and I can get results that I like for wide, mid, and close-up shots. We also get some focal flexibility. In crop mode, the lens can produce around a 52.5mm equivalent, which is nice for tighter framing, while clear image zoom allows us to get anywhere between 1.1 and 1.5 times extra crop, up to around a 79mm equivalent. Right now, this studio shot is using the full frame mode and a 1.2 times crop to give around a 42mm equivalent focal length, which works nicely for the shot that I want to achieve. Now, obviously, these zoomed in and cropped versions won't look exactly like the native lenses of those focal lengths, but they are great for optionality. Another source of optionality is that huge f1.4 aperture. Of course, you retain the ability to stop down and reduce that, but by keeping the top-end headroom, you end up with more options than most lenses for our next subject, bokeh. Combined with the modest but noticeable compression the 35mm focal length provides, we can achieve really good subject separation and prominent bokeh, even when the subject is at a moderate distance away, which again suits studio shots like this really well. The same goes for B-roll, and of course, if you get closer to your subject, the effect of that bokeh gets even more pronounced and can achieve insanely strong background blur. Check out my 2-minute tips on how to get more bokeh if you're interested, and that works particularly noticeably towards the minimum focus distance of the Sigma. You can achieve a more aesthetically pleasing blur than a Vaseline eye wash at a watercolor exhibition, but you always retain the option to dial in less extreme bokeh whenever you like. However, a potential downside of shooting at the super shallow depth of field that you get at f1.4 is that in and out of focus areas become a very fine line. So the Sigma better have some fine focus fundamentals. If we start with autofocus, you'll get good performance in good light, with face and eye tracking staying stickier than the staunchest stalker, but with none of the creepy downsides. Touch tracking rack focus generally works well too. Focus breathing is present and significant enough to be noticeable if you're going from very close to distant focus. However, it's not too dissimilar to most mirrorless lenses, and I shouldn't think this would be a deal breaker for most people. Onto manual focus, and the focus ring is nicely sized and grippy, but for me it's a little too resistant to movement and not quite perfectly damped. It also doesn't have a linear response, which would mean the same amount of focus ring movement would result in the same amount of focal plane movement, and that means it's not quite as good for video work as a cine lens or a linear focus lens like the recently reviewed Sony 20mm f1.8. However, it is absolutely usable and you can get great results, but like manscaping without the shaver guard, it just requires a little bit more close attention and effort to get those good results. So we've got bags of bokeh and fulsome focus, but what about a fitting physicality? Well, the Sigma has build quality I'd compare to that of Terry Crews. It's certainly pretty substantial, but remains sleek, and all that heft is lean and fat-free, accommodating both useful controls and the glut of glass, 15 lens elements to be precise, that facilitate the f1.4 super wide aperture and the inherent image quality. At 645 grams and just under 11 centimeters, this is a mid-range to slightly heavier lens in the full frame world, so don't expect a compact or lightweight setup, but it does handle nicely nonetheless, and it doesn't feel so heavy as to cause fatigue. It also feels nicely balanced on a body like that of the A7 IV. In addition to the solid and nicely finished metal construction, we get the aforementioned rubberized focus ring and multiple points of dust and moisture sealing that should help in moderate bad weather, although Sigma do emphasize that moisture resistance is not the same as being waterproof. So subsea cinematography won't be a salient selling point, but low light performance should be, given that f1.4 aperture and the full frame nature of the lens. So does the Sigma live up to those expectations? The short answer is yes. On a capable low light body like the A7 IV or A7C, full low light comparison of those guys linked if you're interested, you'll get excellent results up to and above ISO 12800, which should give you enough exposure for most situations where you aren't able to control the lighting yourself. So you're likely to get compellingly clean and aesthetically appealing images. But how about those big bokeh balls? Well, these are a highlight too, with minimal to zero artifacts, clean round shapes across the frame with minimal cat's eye distortion and generally a great look. But is the Sigma 35mm f1.4 worth a look for you? As you digest just how bad that segue was, you should also consider liking, subscribing, commenting, and checking out the affiliate links to support and keep the channel alive if you've enjoyed the video. And with that said, do I overall recommend this lens? The short answer is yes. It's significantly cheaper than the Sony 35mm f1.4 G Master, and while it doesn't have all those ultra premium features, at around half the price, I'd say it's a pretty good trade-off unless budget is just not a factor. If we compare it to the Sony 35mm f1.8, it's more of a preference trade-off. You pay a slight premium for the f1.4 aperture of the Sigma and other nice features like the manual and declickable aperture setting, but the Sony does still appeal to me because of the lighter and more compact size. Let me know if you'd like to see me get a hold of that Sony 35mm f1.8 for a future comparison in the comments, but for right now, I'd say the Sigma is going to be the best bet for big aperture bokeh bonanzas. I've certainly enjoyed using it and will be using it a bunch more in the future. But as always, your use case and preferred trade-offs matter the most. So share your thoughts on those in the comments, and even more importantly, until next time, take it easy. The ones that the lens can the ones that the lens can mispronounce while doing a bad job singing. Man, that was awful. Anyway.